now that we're ready to print, I've set up a slightly different area to get working with this. I put down a sheet of newsprint on one side that I generally want to keep clean. This is where I'm going to have my block inked up and where I'm going to keep a lot of the paper that I'm printing with, because I don't really want to get fingerprints all over this. And then on another side, I have a small sheet of glass or perspex, which is where I'm going to be rolling out a flat layer of ink with my roller so that it can then be applied to my block. You could also use like the plastic from a plastic sleeve you'd use in a ring binder, tape the edges to a sheet of cardboard or something to keep it more rigid, and then you can roll out ink onto that. Generally speaking, anything smooth, flat and non-porous will work. So if you have a large flat plate, you could even use that too, just as long as it fits your roller on to roll out a nice square of ink with the same size as your roller on the width and height. So I've got some of my Calico Safe Wash ink here. I've got a palette knife to scoop some out and a roller for my inky area. And then I have a sheet of paper for printing and my block ready to be inked. So the first step that I'm going to take with this is I'm going to set up what I would call a very basic registration plate, which is going to help me line up my block straight when I print so I don't end up with a block like this, or ever so slightly wonky, because it could really ruin the work that you've gone to if you present it quite badly on paper. So I'm just going to put a bit of extra time into that. So you can use a ruler if you want to be a perfectionist with this, but I'm just going to line this up quickly for an example now. So what I have here is my block and a sheet of paper larger than my block. So I'm using an A6 block and an A5 sheet of paper for this. Before I ink anything up, I'm just going to place my block onto this paper and line up where I'd like to go. And then using a pencil, I'm just going to mark where my block is, and I'm going to use this as a guide for lining up both my paper and my block. You can go through much more elaborate processes to get your registration much neater, using registration blocks, taping off areas, or using grey board strips to really lock your block into place. But because this is just a one colour print, I'm just going to be quite loose with this, and as long as it's roughly straight, I'm more than happy with that. But you can put more time into this if needed. So now that I've got my registration sheet there, I can pop that to the side until my ink is ready. Put my block down. Next, I want to work with some of this Safe Wash ink. Just a heads up before you crack open the tin, just use some standard baby wipes as well nearby for cleaning your hands. Once this ink gets onto your hands or clothes, it doesn't dry very quick, but it will keep spreading to different things. So if you get it on your hands, it can spread to your chair, which can spread to your clothes, so on. So it's always good to have some baby wipes nearby, or just make sure you've got a small amount of soap and just keep cleaning your hands. This comes off hands much easier than it does clothes, so just be gentle and careful with your approach. I'm using a big tin of this Safe Wash ink, by the way, but you can get this in tubes as well, depending on how much you want to spend. These do dry out if they're left open for too long, so all of them come with these waxy discs on top, unless you're using a tube, in which case it's much easier to maintain. So if you're just starting out, I'd say grab a tube of any colour you want. I'm working with black today, just because it's nice and easy for you to see the contrast, but you can use whatever you like. So first of all, I'm going to want to use my palette knife, or just even a kitchen knife, just to peel back this waxy disc, just to get to my ink inside there. Oh, it's got quite big skin on it, it's slightly old ink, so I'm just going to scoop a bit deeper. I'm just going to pull out a nice big dollop of ink and put that at the top of the sheet of perspex, glass or plate that I'm using to print with. and just return that waxy disc back onto the top to stop any more of that skin developing. Just going to pop the lid on this as well and pop this to the side. Let me just adjust that blind so that you don't have too much light shining on there. That's a bit better. Let me just adjust this so you can see what I've done. There we go. Fab. So what I want is 1 dollop of ink ready to be rolled out. When you're going to roll out your ink, you don't need to necessarily roll out everything that you've just put out. I always put a little bit extra ink out than I need, but when I come to roll a patch out ready to apply to the block, I don't necessarily need to roll all of this out. This is quite a lot of ink here. I can easily get a nice run of prints. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my roller. I'm just going to roll right up to the ink here until I touch a blob of ink, and then I'm going to roll back. You can see I've just picked up a small amount of the ink here, and there's still lots here. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply a thin patch of ink ready to apply to the block. So the temptation here can be to over ink or under ink if you haven't done this before. If you over ink your block, the ink is going to leak into a lot of these small marks that you've made, and you're going to really sacrifice a lot of the quality of your print. If you under ink your print, it's going to come out very distressed, and you might not get a lot of detail showing. So you really want to find that sweet spot of just a thin layer of ink. And a general rule of thumb is start with less, then start adding more as you go along. Because if you add too much at the beginning, you're going to have to clean up your whole block and start again. So a good way to tell if this is going well is to listen out for the sound of the ink. If it starts to sound like Velcro tearing, you've got a really good amount of ink. If you can't hear anything at all, you don't have enough ink. If it sounds like a puddle, you've drowned your ink. So you need to strip out some less. Hope you guys can hear this sound that I've got here. It's a really nice sound. So I don't need a patch that takes up an overwhelming amount of space, just need it enough to cover my roller so it's nice and evenly covered. When I'm satisfied that my roller is completely covered, I'm ready to apply some ink to my block. So you want to make sure, I should have said this at the start, this is quite important, that your roller is the correct size to fit onto your block. If I had a roller that was this thin and I had to keep going over my block several times, those lines will show up at the end. Some people like that as part of the aesthetic, but generally speaking for now we're going to try and keep it as neat as possible and just roll over our block in one motion. We don't want to be aggressive with this, because if we're not letting the roller roll off at the end, we're just going to apply ink, remove ink as the roller keeps going over. So we're just going to go upwards in one nice motion. That's very even coverage already. I'm off to a great start there. I'm just going to go over again one more time. I've managed to get very good coverage on this the first time, so I don't want to keep applying ink because I could easily over ink at this point. I think the best thing to do for now is to take my proof print and then see how everything looks from there. So I'm going to pop my roller down, make sure I've got clean hands, and then it's time to grab some paper and take a print. So very, very carefully, I'm going to pick up my block and put it onto my registration sheet that I made earlier. It's a little bit crude, but it does the job. I'm happy with that. Let me just move that down a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to take a sheet of paper. And a lot of you may have been wondering why I haven't marked out where the paper will go and why I've only marked out where the block will go. That's because I made sure the paper was the same size as my printing paper. So all I need to do is eyeball this up, marking one corner of the paper with another, and because both sheets of paper are the same size, if I gently let that flap down, it will stay in place. Once you put your paper down, don't attempt to pick it back up and adjust. Just go with it. If you've put it on wonky, that's absolutely fine. You can just work with that, because if you lift it up, you'll have already removed some of the ink that's on your block, and you'll have to just start again. So you might as well just persevere with however this has turned out. So now that I've just gently laid the paper on there, I can use one of my tools for burnishing. Either a wooden spoon or a metal spoon works. I'm going to work with a wooden spoon for now. You can also use a roller and roll over the back of the print. Make sure your roller is clean first, of course. So to start with this method is we're going to very gently apply circular pressure to the entire block, starting in one corner. So what I'm doing is I'm holding the spoon so that my middle finger and my index finger are pressing down inside the spoon so that there is pressure being applied on the back, and then I'm just supporting the spoon with the rest of my hand. You don't want to rub across your block like this because you'll get a really uneven pressure and you won't be able to tell where you've been. Just want to keep just doing small circular motions as you sort of scan all the way across your image. I'm lucky enough to have a slightly grubby spoon for this one so I can see where I've been. So I can almost see a nice impression of the print appearing. If I was using the metal spoon, this wouldn't show up. And if I was using the roller, again, this probably wouldn't show up. But this trusty wooden spoon does a very good job. And when you think you're ready to reveal your print, you can just gently peel back one of the corners and peek underneath without removing the paper entirely. This way, you can still lay the paper back down and finish pulling your print without having to completely start again from scratch. Now this can get quite strenuous if you're doing a really big run of prints, but generally speaking, it's all part of the fun. Now, just going to peel back one of these corners and see what I've got. This looks really good so far. I'm quite positive with this. I'm just going to go with it. Look at that. Not bad for a first print. Glad I didn't ink that up anymore. Hasn't even turned out very distressed at all. So I haven't had to use a press to do any of this, just doing it by hand. The burnishing method works really well. There are professional tools that you can get for it that are made out of bamboo, or you can get ones that are covered with felt, but I always get really good responses just from using a wooden spoon, and you can just pick one of these up from your kitchen. I'm sure you've got some worn down ones there. So now that I have one print that I'm really happy with, I can keep repeating the process of rolling out ink with a roller from the same patch that I had, but applying more ink if the patch is dry, and then reapplying it to my block, and then printing onto a fresh piece of paper. Because this has gone great the first time, I'm going to try and make a few mistakes just to show you what can go wrong with your prints. So first of all, I'm just going to apply ink loosely to this block. So I just haven't been careful at all when I've applied it with the roller, and I'm just going to take another sheet of paper. Ooh, just get that all over my hand. And take another print. I'm just going to see if any of these roller marks show up on here, and I can show you what kind of things to expect to see and how to diagnose those problems if you come across them. There we go. Got still a really nice print, but we have got much more inconsistent marks all over it. So we've got more of what we call distressed marks due to lack of ink in certain areas and probably quite poor burnishing too. A lot of people really like this part of the process. This is a really nice way of showing people that it is handmade. You've got these really beautiful inconsistencies. Let me pair that up with this one here. So you can see the differences between the two. Got very solid black on this one, much more distress marks here. Depends what you prefer really, but it's difficult to keep this consistent, so it will vary print to print, which might make it hard to edition, but it's beautiful nonetheless. Now I'm also going to do some really poor burnishing and just see how that turns out. So let's ink up our block. Fantastic. So now at this point I've just re-inked my block. You might not have seen on the camera the difference that you did when I first inked up the block. The block was green to start with when I applied the black ink. You could see clearly where the ink was applied, but reapplying ink can be quite tricky. You can't necessarily see how the coverage works. I'm not sure how clearly you can see this on the camera, but you can see now that I've just applied ink, the block itself has a really shiny surface. So whenever you're reapplying ink to a block, just before you go to print, I'd always hold it up to the light and just see what kind of reflection you have. You'll be able to see any inconsistencies in your inking at this point, and then you can address that before you waste any of your nice paper pulling a print. So now that I know this is all inked up, pop another sheet of paper on here. Let's just do a really simple burnish. I'll just do it as quick as that. See how that turned out. There we go. So compared to the others, this one is much speedier burnish there. So you've got the first print up here, just solid black. Second one, some very inconsistent rolling, but still good burnishing, and one with very poor burnishing down the bottom. All still look like great prints. This one's quite weak in its detail, but the great thing about burnishing is that you have full control over your print. If you want to have these inconsistencies, you can add them in a way that you can't do with a press, where everything is really neat. You can add in all of these sort of handmade quirks that a lot of people really go for with printmaking. So that kind of just covers up a really simple way of printing at home. Besides this, I'd say take it for a spin yourself. Keep inking up your blocks, keep printing. Always make sure you're getting more than one out of it. That's the whole point of printmaking, is creating editions and working with nice handmade reproductions. So I really hope that you guys have all taken something valuable away from this workshop. I hope all of the tips that I've sort of thrown at you help. But the main thing is that you really need to get stuck in and try things yourself. Learn from your own accidents and find your own way with that, because this is very much like a baseline skill level that I've just thrown at you, and I think you need to build your foundations on that yourself through experience to really become confident with this process. A quick few tips for cleaning up. Would say if you have any marks on any surfaces that you're struggling to get out with soap and water, which is what's recommended with this brand of ink, is you can just use some vegetable oil just to loosen that up, and then chuck some more soap and water on there just to clean up the veg oil. It's really, really easy to do. Again, not so easy to get out of clothes, so always make sure you wear the right clothing, but very easy to get off non-porous surfaces. Fantastic. Well, I feel like this wraps it up, but thank you guys so much for sticking around this far into the video. I really hope you've enjoyed it, found everything inspirational. I really hope so. And do keep checking out Print of the People for updates on any other videos they're doing or artist talks. There's always something going on, and yeah, we're always happy to share our love for printmaking. Please find out any more info in the description below, and hopefully see you around soon. Thanks so much. Have a great day.